Today on the Staying Alive and Rich podcast, I have special leadership guest, Mr. Michael Bunting. He's an expert consultant, founder, author, public speaker and writing who focuses on leadership excellence, employee wellbeing and mindfulness and burnout prevention. Welcome, Michael, to the Staying Alive and Rich podcast. You're my first podcast guest for 2023, and I'm super excited because you're a brilliant author, and I've read one of your books, ironically, before I even had the email, and called The Mindful Leader, which is full of so many great, useful nuggets in there, which we'll dive into a little bit later. But you've been a leadership development expert for many years, and I believe other than authoring your own books and doing a lot of public speaking, you've also helped leaders in corporate as well, and government, and which is phenomenal. So you've been doing this for over 16 years, I believe, yes?
It's now 20, I think it's 21 years. But it's, it gets scary as you're getting older. It's like, it's a prideful, pride. I've got a lot of experience. At some point in the back of your mind, you go, hold on a second. This is getting too many years now.
It's good. It just makes you more and more of an expert.
Yeah. That's what I'm telling myself.
Yeah, keep telling yourself that. That's what I tell myself.
Yeah.
But so, look, for those people that aren't familiar with your work and what you're all about, I guess my first question to you is, tell me a little bit about your background. How did you end up becoming so interested in leadership, particularly mindful leadership as well?
Yeah.
Because I know mindfulness is, something that it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And after I read your book, it actually gave me a better insight on what it is to be mindful, taking the leader part out of it, but just what it is to actually be mindful in everyday life, let alone work.
Well, to try and make it interesting and not self-indulgent for your listeners, maybe this is one way to describe it. When I was 22 years old, I'd finished my 2 business degrees. I had this first sort of 3 months in the workplace, and I went into a cold state of shock, where there was a sense of, and I think many people who go into a workplace have this experience, it's looking at people in their 40s and their life just revolved around working and their next holiday and consuming and working and their next holiday. And I got such a shock that I was like, is that it? Is this what life's about? My God. And I was, I don't know, best way to describe it is I was devastated by that. And I began to become very, very curious about there must be more to this existence than just, work, children, family, holidays, consume. Like, it just shocked me to the core that there could possibly be this existence is about that. And so I began becoming very interested in Eastern and Western philosophy. I don't have a religious bone in my body, so I couldn't sort of turn to religion because I just have too much of a cynical, questioning mind for that. And started studying, from anything from Plato to Socrates to Sufi to Rumi's to Buddhist teachings, and began to try and make sense of this life. Like, why are we here? And what does happiness really mean? And is there a happiness available that's independent of all this consumerism and family, the craziness of the average person's life? And so I began, and then hit a brick wall probably a year and a half or 2 years into it, because recognizing that intellectual understanding is not reality. And so that's when mindfulness or meditation came into practice. And I remember begrudgingly sort of finally surrendering to the idea that I needed to meditate, because I hated it.
That's a good word, surrender, isn't it? Yeah. I think you speak on behalf of many people that have gone, I really don't want to do this, but hey, it's, I may as well try it.
Yeah. And it was driven by, we have a saying in our work that we will only change when the pain of staying the same is less. Sorry, when the pain of staying the same is more than the pain of change. And so I think I was in enough pain and sort of existential wonder, and I didn't realize until later, a certain amount of childhood pain too, that the status quo wasn't acceptable to me. So I was willing to do the work and do the mindfulness work. And I remember at one point I made a commitment, and I meditated half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening, every single day without missing for 10 straight years.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and then hit a wall in some ways later. But that then sort of eventually got into, I had another crisis moment where one of my own mentors, my meditation mindfulness mentors, and we were deeply dedicated to the truth, he lied to me and he behaved unethically, and I got such a shock that then propelled me into more wonder. It's like, how come you get people who can be dedicated to being really honest but still be really dishonest? And that then propelled me into the depth psychology work, the shadow work, Carl Jung's term shadow, where we look at the dark side of our own selves and our anger and our hatred and our unresolved dark side, right? And that was fascinating. And then that eventually sort of got fully integrated into corporate leadership development, because every organization's got a dark side, every leader's got a dark side, every team's got a dark side. And most of us don't want to look at the dark side. We want to keep on pretending, looking at fairies and lights, And if we publish new values and we all believe in them enough, then all will be well. Not really, because actually there's still a bunch of behaviors that everyone wants to pretend are not happening, especially the senior leaders. That creates a lot of dissonance and pain in organizations and underperformance too.
Wow. Yeah, 100%. And I'm a firm, I haven't done as much mindfulness work as you have, obviously. I've probably skimmed, if I can say that. So I'm quite familiar with the shadow work and Carl Jung works. And it is, for me, and like you mentioned, the polarity of the two different sides of a human being is something that I'd love to know a little bit more about. But I'll be honest with you, I'm a bit fearful too. And I have kind of asked those questions, and there is, I can't remember where I read this, and which philosopher said it, whether it was a philosopher or it was an author, I can't remember, but I do remember the quote it was Jordan Peterson. It was Jordan Peterson that said it, the most powerful man is the man that understands his own power and controls it, referring to that dark side. Is understanding his own power and being able to control it, and still be a good human being and work from that place. So fascinating stuff. So 10 years of meditating half an hour in the morning and in the evening. That is commitment, my friend. That is commitment beyond anything. I struggle with meditating for 2 minutes. It's like, all right, I'm going to meditate now. All right, everyone be quiet. Yeah. And it's like, okay, it's done. I'm going now. But 30 minutes. So tell me about that. I'm fascinated because I know how difficult it is to meditate.
Yeah. So I'll give you, I live in a weird world in the sense where I'm either teaching, presenting, which is to people genuinely wanting to grow, or I'm with friends and family that I have access to deep awareness work. And during COVID, I wanted to be a professional golfer when I was younger. And so I started playing. I didn't play golf for 20 years. So I started playing golf in COVID, and I sort of had this unique experience of hanging around people for 4 hours that had generally no interest in awareness work. They were just normal people doing their normal things in life. And, they would ask me questions occasionally like, oh, why didn't you play for 20 years? And I would say, oh, well, I spent, which I would typically do, about 40 days of silent meditation retreats a year, right? That would be my primary, which I've been doing for many, many years. And they would look at me shocked, and you could see them almost backing away from me, like, who is this guy, right? This is a weird alien. And then some of them would go, but like, why would you do that, right? Which is kind of your question at some level. And I've come to try and explain it really simply, is that it should be for all of us that if we had 10 minutes on a park bench, or let's say you were sitting at a bus station and the bus was 10 minutes late and your phone battery died because, God forbid, you didn't have access to social media. The average person will spend 6 years and 8 months on social media before they die, by the way. It's the latest statistic.
Really?
Yeah, it's shocking, right? Just
6
unbelievable.
years?
Yeah, that's like sitting on your phone for 6 years and 8 months browsing social media. That's how much time you'll spend, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's mad. But that's where we are as a society now. And And so theoretically, if you've got nothing to do for 10 minutes, right, let's say, like no phone, no one to talk to, nothing to do, what should happen is that it should be 10 minutes of bliss, because it should be that your base condition as a human being is at ease. There's a deep ease in your mind. There's an ease in the body. There's a heart and a mind that are harmonious with itself, right? Because that's what we keep seeking. We're longing for this feeling of wholeness and oneness with ourselves. But then you ask the average person, so what is it like when you've got 10 minutes for nothing to do sitting on a bus station? It's like it's agony for most people. They're anxious, they're bored, they're thinking, they don't know what to do with themselves. And so I would say, well, that's revealing. That 10 minutes is revealing the true state of your mind and your emotional body and how it really is. And for most people, it's a freaking mess. And it's a lot of pain in there. And so when we meditate, we come directly in contact with our unresolved, agitated, disharmonious or non-harmonious mind. And so meditation's not challenging because meditation's challenging. It's challenging because we've got such fractured, disoriented, traumatized, numb mind bodies that most of us can't stand to be with ourselves. And then I'll often ask my golf buddies who are now looking at me even more shocked and say, well, like if you can't be at peace with your own body and mind, like tell me what you think the odds are that something outside yourself is going to give that to you, like a great golf score or a, beautiful new husband, wife, children, car, job. And what you'll find, and the research bears this out, there's nothing outside yourself that can actually provide that thing that you're longing for, that sort of, because it's you with you. And so that's what gives me, at least, or gave me the determination to stay. It was recognizing like there's no escape. I can't outrun myself. No one can.
No, you can't.
And so I may as well get busy with meeting myself and actually coming to peace with myself.
And I guess probably try and understanding yourself too. And I think one of the things meditation I find for me personally is cutting out that noise. I find I don't know whether it's because social media or we're overstimulated and there's so much noise, and that noise transpires in my mind as well. I feel like prior to 10 years ago, my mindset was very different. And I don't know whether it's because I know more as I'm getting older, I'm a little bit wiser, I'm exposed to more, and it is probably a bit of everything. But quieting the mind is becoming more and more challenging. And, there was a meditation there's a meditation app I downloaded called Fit Mind recently, and I'm not going to lie, I haven't been consistent with it. I was consistent with it for about 3 weeks.
Yeah. Which is most people, right? It's
right.
Most people.
Right. And what I did find was it actually helped me be aware of what's actually going on in my mind as a third person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of looking outside and going, okay, so why am I actually thinking about this? Why am I jumping from here to there? What's going on here? It's interesting insight. But sitting still with yourselves or with ourselves in 2023 now is becoming difficult. And you know what? There is so much. If we've got existing trauma, having to deal with that, or haven't had to deal with that, and now it's there, it's a lot for some people,
Well, like an easy way because we always try and present deep, sophisticated, psychological, transformational work to executive leaders who are time poor and don't want therapy. They want a process that helps them grow and change. We've found ways to describe complex things quite simply. One of those is really interesting, and hopefully this resonates with your listeners. When we're children, this comes out of Dr. Gabor Mate's work as a clinical psychiatrist. When we're children, we have these two fundamental needs. One need is connection and attachment with our caregivers, our parents. And the other need is our own integrity and authenticity with ourselves. And both are biological needs. So if you're running around in the jungle and you're distracted, the mind's all over the place, and you're not at one with yourself and in tune with yourself, you'll basically won't survive long. Nowadays, unfortunately, we've got such a synthetic environment that we don't have to be in tune with ourselves because we just get provided everything. But what's really interesting with children is that when children, right from 0 days old onwards, when they're faced with a dilemma, which we all were as kids, where if I'm my authentic self, I'm in integrity with myself, will I get attached? Will my parents approve of me? And for all of us, there were multiple times as kids that our parents withdrew their love, maybe told us we were silly or stupid. Don't dance like that. Don't do this. If you don't work at school hard enough, you'll never be enough. Don't be an artist. Be like this. There's multiple messages we get as kids that our parents need us to be who they want us to be. They don't really get to know who we really are. And so what happens is when a child's faced with the dilemma of, should I be myself or should I be what my parents think I should be?
Yeah.
All kids will go for the parent because attachment survival. If our parents don't approve of us, don't love us, like, we die. So we are by default go for attachment. What happens then is that we abandon ourselves. And then when we get to 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, we haven't even no idea who we are. We're so disconnected from ourselves. And then when we look at this in organizations, we have this term now we use called image management. And it's where people show up, imposter syndrome. They show up to meetings they don't need to be at. They over-perfectionalize their slide decks. They pretend they know when they don't know, or they pretend they're great when they're not great. All of this stuff. And we've asked, we did a survey in our new book, 5,000 people, how much percentage of time and energy is wasted in your organization on image management? And the data shows us over 40%, right? So,
wow, 40%.
Image management, 40% of time and energy is just burnt in an organization on image management.
That's a lot.
Huge.
For any organization, regardless how big or small, 40%. That's
it's
a lot.
Huge amount of time and energy. But, we image manage in our marriages. We image manage to our children. We defend ourselves. So, we ask things like, if I said to my mom, for example, when I was discovering some of the things that she did, when I was doing later in life therapy work, and I was like, oh, my mom was quite cool emotionally. That relates to what's called cool trauma in a childhood. Cool trauma is when you don't get enough connection from your parents, and it's insidious and it's very damaging. Now, 99.9% of kids get cool trauma because their parents are on their phones, and there's this endless screens around, so the children are not getting nearly enough connection, and that creates profound sense of not enoughness, trauma in the child. And then what happens is, maybe one day you give your mom or your dad feedback, like my case. Hey, mom, did you know that you weren't really emotionally available as a parent, and that's caused me to feel certain things and show up in certain ways in my adult life? The typical parental response is, well, you turned out okay. I don't think there's any problem. And that literally is image management from the parent, because we all hold an image of ourselves and we hold it precious. And then if someone challenges that image, like if my wife says to me, you're selfish, would I go, oh, that's an interesting comment. How am I selfish? I'm kind of curious. Show me time. No, we don't respond like that normally. We go, no, I'm not. You're selfish. Or I'm less selfish than you. We instantly defend.
Become reactive.
We become this, and because we want our image to stay intact. What this is indicating is that we're not at ease, and we have not enoughness inside ourselves. And the image creates the enoughness. And so if the image is threatened, we feel threatened. And so there's not like an ease and an openness, and we become defensive when we get feedback. We all do, because we're so scared that we'll get that disapproval again. And the only way we got the approval is the image. So if the image is in any way challenged, we freak out.
Because we've anchored, it's become who we are. We've anchored our
identity into
onto the image, exactly. And that for a lot of people is, and you're speaking, and I know, including myself, I don't think I'm that image orientated, but there are things that I would do a particular way, which as you're talking, I'm already questioning. Oh, that's interesting. Is that how I perceive myself? How do we break away from that? Like how do you mitigate that? How do you even become aware of that?
So what's interesting is, and maybe your listeners have the same response now, like one of your first comments was like, no, I don't think that image oriented. That itself is usually image management, right?
There you go.
Your mind is going, oh, no, that's not me. And it's like, no, I'm pretty, that's what the mind does. The mind tries to protect ourselves from the there's a possibility that I do. Now, image management's not what we think of it as classically, like, my hairstyle and my fancy car and my position. It can be as simple as being defensive or perfectionistic, or, for example, being overly dramatic. So it can be very, very subtle. And if you were completely free of image management, you would literally be the Buddha. You'd be fully enlightened. Because the ego itself is image management.
I was going to say, it sounds like the ego.
Yeah, the ego is a pain. The ego is a pain management. The way we describe it is the ego is a pain management system. So when we have excessive pain in our childhood, so whether it be not enough attention or violent attention, or like I saw in a coffee shop a few years ago, a mother leaning over to a 3-year-old child, putting the finger in the face of the child, saying, "You're a stupid child." That's trauma, right? Wow. The research now shows that if you have repeated verbal violence, it has the same impact as physical violence, on a child.
That too.
Right?
Yeah.
So what happens is you get this abandonment, violence, and we all get it in various ways. And then you're like, you have, it's too much to bear, the pain. So you create a compensatory behavior, right? So in my case, for example, when I wasn't getting enough connection and attention, I have two things I do. One is I become dramatic, because when I was sick, I would get my mom's love. So I kind of unconsciously learned this, like, drama queen, I call myself, like, oh my God, I'm feeling so sad today, because that's how I got attention and love, right? But it's the ego trying to recover or compensate for pain, the pain of not getting connected, enough seen. And the other one I do is, I try and win at everything. So it's like, I'm going to be a superstar. And when I'm shiny and bright enough, then
you'll get attention too.
I'll get attention, I'll feel love. And then you can say, oh, Michael, God, you've got such a big ego. So one of the things I joke about myself is I hold one of my books up in webinars and I say, did you know I'm a best-selling author? And I'm like, I'm kind of mocking myself, because I'm going, that's my image management. That's me saying, hey, please approve of me. Please tell me I'm enough. And people go, my God, that guy's got a big ego. He's always like telling you about how his books have sold so well and blah, blah. No, actually, all he is a guy who's insecure and desperately looking for your approval. That's the truth. And that's his pain management system. So whenever we're very careful with the word ego. If someone's saying, oh, that person's got a big ego, the person who's judging them is coming from their ego too.
The ego too.
So beneath the ego, there's a whole world of challenging feelings that are not resolved in us. You just got to watch Maths or Married at First Sight, and you see people's childhood pain kind of ripping around and acting out.
It's a guilty pleasure. I can't help myself, and I love it. I actually watch it because I love listening to the psychologist, and I look at it, and it's horrible to admit this. I hate admitting it, but I'm going to admit it. It's like watching a train crash from Monday to Wednesday, and it's like who's gonna go down. So sad but it's sad, and at the same time, it's also like, wow, I don't know about me. I'm only talking from my own experience. There are parts of everyone in their flaws that I can see in myself, like, oh, yeah, I've done that. I was watching it with my husband the other day, and I said, I've done that to you, haven't I? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, that's not good. He goes, I'm glad you can see it.
What you're saying is huge, what you just shared now. Very few people can do that, where they can look at a behavior and say to their loved one, like, I do that, hey, and it hurts you, doesn't it? And they're on the park and go, oh my God, it's so wonderful when your partner can do that. But so few people can. What mostly happens in relationships is the image management, right? It's like, no, there's no problem with me. The problem is with you. And you see that play out in Married at First Sight, because we're not given the skills. One of my favorite questions to my corporate clients is, who are usually, multiple degrees, some of them Nobel Prize winning, some of them I've worked with.
Wow.
And I'll ask them and say, how many of you guys were taught how to manage your emotions and mind through all of your education? And no one. No one. So you have no idea how to manage sadness or anger or shame. You have no idea how to process that skillfully and integrate it and help yourself grow. No idea.
We're never taught. It's not
No,
something that you get taught in school by your
no,
teachers. That's not like someone's mentored you. And I think those skills are
no.
learnt at a very young age when you first feel that
Yeah,
emotion.
yes,
It's not like your parents will sit you down and go, darling, you were hurt by that child or that kid, called you a name, and I know you're feeling
yeah,
upset and angry, and just sit. No one teaches you that. Well, none of us did,
no.
And then you
No,
grow up into this adult, and then all of a sudden it's like compounding, and
yes,
you've got all this stored emotion and you don't know what to do with it. So you create this image
yes,
that is what you perceive yourself. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm lying, as your perfect self, and how
yes.
but sometimes it falters
Is
when the
image and
ego.
addiction.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
two
yeah.
things that come out are image and addiction. And
Image and
addiction,
addiction to
image
the
and
image,
addiction.
or a separate thing.
All kinds of addiction, just general addiction. So it can be addiction to social media, addiction to alcohol, drugs, to TV, to Netflix, to some. It can get really subtle addiction to being in control all the time, addiction to being right. Lots of people are addicted to being right.
Oh yeah, I'm
Um,
Eastern European. Everyone's right except for me.
yeah. So
Everyone's right.
the addiction, it's like it's what's called psychological rigidity at the subtle level, where I'm constantly holding on desperately to something that is alleviating insecurity or pain, just like alcohol, right? Or just like
Interesting.
if you're listening to this, next time you feel emotionally uncomfortable, notice what you'll do. And most of us, you'll go for the phone, or you'll turn the TV on, or you'll do something to move away from that discomfort in yourself. That's usually a pattern of addiction. And we all
Wow.
have it.
We all have it. Tell me something, Michael. Obviously, you've been doing this for a long time, and talking about regulating your self-image and image management. Have you noticed now, with obviously the rise of social media? And this is not bearing on any age, because I feel like people our age, older, younger, and as you mentioned earlier, 6 years, we're all going to be spending 6 years on social media. Have you noticed that has impacted our self-image, or image management even more? Like, is it harder? Because I have these conversations with friends and colleagues and peers where, they might look at something on Instagram or Facebook or Netflix or whatever, and think that, oh, maybe I should be looking like that at that particular age, or maybe I need to be driving this, or maybe I should be living in this, or what have you. Have you found that actually has made that whole situation on how we perceive ourselves or manage ourselves a lot worse? Have we completely lost awareness of who we are within this
Yes.
process?
Yeah. So I'll start with a subtle example. If, for example, a child is sad,
Mm-hmm.
right, let's say they're sad, and the parents know how to mindfully and consciously, constructively work with sadness, they would typically respond to the child. If the child said, "I'm sad," the parents might say, "Is there something you want to share?" And the child may say no, and then you might, as a parent, say, "That's fine. Like, that's cool. Like, your sadness is welcome here, and I can sit with you if you need." But there's no attempt to try and make the sadness go away from the parent, right? So what most people do, though, is they freak out when someone they care about sad. So then they panic and they try and fix. Oh, let's distract you. Let's have some pasta. Let's have some, let's go and have some fun. Don't worry, you don't have to be sad. There's all these movements that parents do that don't allow children to feel their full range of emotions and feel connected with the parent, because the parent doesn't have emotional maturity. And so the parent unconsciously freaks out, right? And then fixes, judges, plans, schemes, you name it, right? So what happens then is the child doesn't know how to regulate difficult feelings, right? So then the child chases constantly good feelings, because that's how you maintain happy parents. And that chasing of good feelings very quickly translates into addiction. And then social media comes along and it like rocket fuels it. And now the child is not feeling enough already, because there's certain, even very loving parents, if they're not conscious, they're going to give multiple messages to the child that certain things are okay to feel, certain things, you can distract yourself with, you don't have to feel that. There's a range of things. And then from that emptiness, the child is like ripe for, and we all are ripe for intense addiction, and plus all the notifications, everything's designed to addict you. And we're like lemmings because we're just ready for the addiction anyway. And so then we go, and then we, the image management in the emptiness just is on hyper speed. Yeah. And that's why you're getting, we're at the highest levels of depression in the history since recording depression. So anxiety, chronic anxiety. So I mean, by example, but to give you the leadership example, one of the fascinating things about our work is, and you talk about burnout and
burnout's been a big topic. It's been a massive topic, and especially I feel like last year, at the end of 2022, pretty much nearly every person I spoke to, regardless whether they had a business, they were an employee, even myself personally, I was exhausted. You know, and tired. I finished up the year going, oh my God, I just want to like sleep for 3 years now. Like I was that tired. And I was spent. There was nothing left. And it wasn't because I particularly had a dramatic year, or there wasn't anything that it was just, I was completely burnt out. And I was having an interesting discussion with a girlfriend of mine that is kind of an integrative therapist as well, and she was kind of, made me aware of how impactful COVID was, and how it was a collective trauma, and how it was, we're expecting ourselves to just get back into the scheme of things, but we haven't actually addressed what's happened, particularly here in Melbourne. We were locked up for so long that it was the impacts of that. We still haven't processed it, and both physically, mentally, and emotionally, which is why there's been so many people that I've spoken to that have felt exactly the same as me. And then I talk to you, and you talk about image management, because that's what we did in 2022. We all put on this brave face. So it's fine. How's work going? Fantastic. We're really busy. Everything's fantastic. It's great. High-fiving each other, and you're doing a great job, and then going home collapsing.
Yes. And the tricky part is when we collapse, we don't know how to skillfully collapse. We don't know how to mindfully collapse. So the collapse is usually it's kind of going back into numbness, and then you dance between activity and numbness, activity and numbness. And we start struggling to find what I sometimes call the oceanic stillness that replenishes us.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me a little bit more about the oceanic stillness. I'm fascinated. That replenishes us. I want to go there. Can we go there? Can we catch a bus? What time does it leave?
So there is when we begin to practice mindfulness, most of the time we have glimpses of stillness, just little glimpses of it. And then most of the time we're struggling with a very busy mind, or, because we're still absolutely entranced by the belief that the solution to our problems lies in the next thought, lies in some external solution to us. We're completely entranced by our own minds. And as you begin to practice more and more mindfulness, you become less and less enchanted and entranced by the mind, because you begin to see that the mind, can I swear?
Of course you can. Knock yourself out.
The mind is just endless bullshit. It's just endless lies and bullshit. It just constantly tells us lies. Like, if I just get to the end of the year, then I'll be okay. Or, if I just have an extra day's rest, or if I just had another child, then I would be complete. If I just got married, if I just got divorced, the mind's constantly promising what I call frozen snapshot, a frozen snapshot in the future, that if I have that, then it's going to be great or okay. And then it chases that snapshot, and life is not a snapshot. Life is endless fluidity of change. And so the mind is delusional. It literally believes in like fantasy fairy tales that are plain out silly, but it constantly believes in these, right? And when the mind becomes slowly and more disenchanted with all of these silliness that it goes on with, what happens is this more and more stillness grows. So stillness, spaciousness in the mind is a function of practicing stillness, but it's also a function of becoming disenchanted with activity of the mind. It's like you become more and more, I'll give you an easy example. The one day I was meditating and my to-do list was racing in the mind, right? And then I noticed a lot of tension in the body, a lot of fizz in the system, a lot of discomfort. And then I just, because I've practiced for so long, what I'm about to describe to you happened in about 5 seconds, but this is a slow motion version of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, what do you think is going to happen at the end of the to-do list? Oh, then I'll be at peace when the to-do list is done. Okay. So you're believing that peace lies at the end of the to-do list, right? Right now, how are you? Oh, you're full of tension, full of agitation. What are you trying to do right now? You're trying to be present and still. Oh, but you're believing that to-do list at the end of the to-do list, you can have it, not here now. Got it. When to-do lists finish? Oh, yeah, they never finish because there's always a to-do list. So when will you really find that peace as long as you engage in this thought pattern? Never. You'll die in agitation, believing that you to-do list, And so seeing that whole schmozzle of the mind and going, wow, the mind is so delusional, man. It just paints madness all the time. And then choosing to come back to the present moment and going, let me live in peace with the to-do list.
Interesting.
Right?
Interesting.
And so what happens over time is this oceanic stillness becomes more and more accessible. This kind of resting, this deep resting with the moment, this moment's enough. Yeah. There's no destination in life. There's no arrival. There's like, I can rest into this moment and not panic that, oh, hold on, I've forgotten something. I need to do something. That all of that is delusional. It's completely delusional because the only thing that's real is this moment. The only time you'll ever feel satisfied is when you're in this moment. If you think about love, for example, like you're married, like when you're most available with love and in love, it's when you're present. When you're growing the most and you have most insight, you're present. So it's like all the best things happen in life when you're present. But the mind convinces us, if I just had X more conditions, just X more this or just a little bit more that. It's what I call the when-then game. When, then,
And then everything's going to be fine.
Then it'll be fine. As if then reality
and it never
will
is,
unfold.
is it? You know
Never.
what? Now that you're saying that, how many times I've gone, if I just do this and then I'll be all right, and then something else will come up. And then, okay, if I just finish this, then this will be all right. If I just lost 2 kilos, I'll be happier. If I just freaking, and it's you're right. You're right.
Relentless.
Is
that causes more? That's more the root of burnout than anything else. Is the mind fighting and negotiating with reality. One of the jokes I say, has anyone ever won their argument with reality? But boy, we have a red hot go at trying to, argue with reality. You can't win that argument. Some of us are so crazy, we're still arguing with the past. It's like you're never, ever going to win that argument.
That I've learned.
So the mind is like, the mind genuinely believes that happiness is a set of conditions outside of ourselves. It genuinely believes that, which is totally delusional.
So in your practice, mindfulness practice, is that how would you describe it? Like, what is mindfulness? Like, is it being present in that oceanic deep and allowing that space and just observing your thoughts, not even engaging in your mind and just actually sitting there with it? Is that what you would... I'm answering my own question, but I'm going to let you answer it. Sorry.
It's a range of things. So it can be highly investigative attention. So it's attention. Firstly, mindfulness is attention, and it's always here now. If you're lost in thought about past or future, you're not mindful. So it's always a function of it's sometimes I call self-awareness. It's like you cannot be self-aware if you're not aware what's happening now. So there's no self-awareness without mindfulness, interestingly, because mindfulness by definition is being in the present, attentionally present, for over a period of time. It's not a split second of presence and then off you go. It's like stabilizing the attention is mindfulness. And then it has 2 primary qualities. It has that deeply open, spacious stillness. So like think about it like a sunset. It's like you're at the beach and you're at a sunset and there's a sense of vastness and kind of everything's soft and relaxed and receptive and open. That's a function. That's one quality of mindfulness. It's this lovely, effortless openness. And then the other quality of mindfulness is this. It can get quite intense. Is investigative curiosity. So let me give you an example. I might have a thought, oh God, it'll be nice when I have an ice cream later. I can watch that thought from the sunset perspective. It's like, oh yeah, there's a thought drifting across the mind. Whatever. Relax. I'm the sky, not the cloud. I just watch the cloud drift by, right?
And not get emotional, not attach an emotion to the thought. Just allow the thought to pass without attaching emotion.
Yes. The investigative style of mindfulness is the thought rises, oh, I wish I could have an ice cream later. Then I get curious. What's happening in the body right now that I'm trying to run from? Because the ice cream represents an escape from something that's happening right now. What is it that I'm in resistance to in myself, that I'm running from? And you might find it's loneliness, for example. So when I'm lonely, I eat ice cream. So I then get an insight into, when that thought comes and I start longing for ice cream, it's actually a sign for me that I'm lonely. Then I go, I'm kind of stylizing it now. It's all just attention, but I'm giving you a flavor of it verbally. It's like, what does loneliness feel like in the body? Where is it in the body? Does it move? Can I sit with it? Can I really sit with loneliness? Can I let go of all the stories and really, really integrate, be with the feelings that I normally run from? That's the investigative quality of mindfulness. And that's where all the really big growth happens, because what we've found is that maturity, and this is adult development, as research has confirmed this, is that maturity is the ability to stay with difficult emotions and not go for the compensatory addiction. Easy example, jealousy, in a relationship. It's like jealousy is an action to try and control another person, right? That is because the feeling of abandonment or aloneness is unbearable. So because I can't tolerate it, I go for the control. If I had to learn to be with and integrate the feelings of abandonment and loneliness in the body, I no longer am afraid of it because I've integrated it, then the jealousy disappears. And then you get really, really mature. And that's the height of maturity as an adult, is not being scared of feelings anymore, being able to, and the tricky part is it's quite binary. If you're not willing to feel the feelings, in other words, be mindful and present with the feelings, you will go for the addiction. 100% reliable. It's binary. It's one or the other.
That's fascinating. How do we, on a basic level, how do we get comfortable with some of these emotions that, emotional intelligence, for an adult is difficult for a lot of adults, especially I don't know how old you are, but I'm, hedging towards 50 now. And you know what, it is, we never spoke about emotions, and obviously culture plays a big role in that as well, and how we've been brought up. So you get to this age where you think you have some idea of emotional intelligence because you can understand someone on a certain level because you may have experienced the same thing as them. But then there's that whole other element of it when you said earlier before, integrating, understanding what you're feeling, not going for the chocolate or the cigarette or the alcohol or the drug or whatever it is that people do habitually or behaviorally to avoid that emotion. How do we, on a very basic level, if you can share that with us, integrate some of those emotions that are uncomfortable or sit uncomfortably with us?
The very first thing to say is to not, it's tricky. So I think it's the pinnacle in a sense of mindfulness work. It's really quite challenging. Is the principle of it is to embrace it and feel it. That's the principle. And the mind does not like that. The mind's like, but why would I do that? And the answer is because if you don't, you'll go for the addiction. It's one or the other, right? Now, all emotions are a physical experience. Any emotion you feel. So whatever I said, if I say I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel confused, I feel joyful, you could ask someone, where is that in your body? It's always a physical, one could almost argue if you didn't have a body, you wouldn't have emotions. All emotions are a physical sensation in the body. So when you have the feeling, so if someone said, I feel sad, I might say, where in the body is the sadness? Like, where do you notice? And they might say, oh, it's heavy in my chest area or something like, oh, it's heavy. Okay. how does it move? Is it hot or cold? And you begin to really just feel those feelings without the narrative and the story and the drama and and then you feel them without, this is the hard part, you feel them without agenda. Because most people say that, oh, so if I just feel the feelings, they'll go away. And it's like they will go away because all emotions are temporary. They shift and move. That's the nature of emotions. But most people go, if I feel that feeling, the terrible, dreaded feeling, sadness, shame, whatever, I'll get lost in it forever. I can't tell you how many of my clients have said that to me. And I go like, really? That's an interesting conclusion. So you believe emotions are permanent. You'll get lost in it forever, really? And I go, well, maybe you've never really investigated them, have you? You've never really looked at them, felt them, noticed them, embraced them, friendly with them. No. So then if you don't, you must bounce out. So it's kind of tricky because you have to then also have the courage sometimes to allow tears to come or to allow jumping around because anger's there, Like there's lovely somatic exercises. If there's a lot of anger in the body, you should jump up and down, beat a pillow, because it's like not vented at someone ever. That's never going to work out well for anybody. But it doesn't mean you don't feel the anger. You don't allow it. Your life. Feeling anger is really important. It's your life energy. If you push anger down, you'll end up depressed. Depression. You'll depress emotions.
Without sounding narcissistic, I love anger. And I tell you why I love anger, because I find every time I get angry, and it's not necessarily pinpointed at anyone, I actually get angry with myself, if the truth be known. It actually shifts. There's always a shift.
Yeah.
Recently I was quite frustrated and angry with some work stuff, and I was really angry with myself, not with anyone in particular, but just with how did I miss that? Why didn't I think about this? Da, 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 da. And I remember waking up one morning and I said, I walked out of the bathroom and my husband kind of went, oh, what's happened in there? She looks so angry. You look angry. Are you all right? I said, yeah, I had a very, very abrupt board meeting with myself. I said, I know what I need to do now. And it literally shifts the energy.
Yeah.
And things started to change in the work dynamic. So I think our perception of anger and because there's so much contradictory things in media as well. Some people say,
Well, we would say never act the anger out on anyone. That's never going to be a constructive. Verbally, physically, never. It's just not ever going to be constructive. But equally, don't repress it, because you'll end up in addiction again. You'll end up eating the chocolate cake instead of feeling your anger. You'll end up denying your anger, and you'll end up anxiety. A lot of people who are anxious, part of it's because they've repressed their anger.
Really?
Yeah, you repress. I know some people personally like this. They repress their anger and try and deny it, and then they end up constantly. The legs are jumping up and down. And they sit, they sit in the leg. People, their legs bouncing all the time. Like that's a lot of that's unprocessed, unfelt anger, and then it sits in anxiety in the system, right? But again, it comes down to the bottom line is embracing the feelings in the body without the narrative and just patiently embracing them, just like you would a child that's sad or a child that's angry. You could imagine it's almost like that as an image. It's like, well, Michael's angry, right? Okay, so let him feel his anger. Okay, what does he need to do? He needs to jump up and down. He needs to shout. Okay, that's fine. Do it. Don't do it at anyone. Just do it in your own space. Or he's sad. Okay, I'm talking about myself here. He's like, sad. Yeah. How does sadness feel in the body? Oh, the chest is heavy. Okay. What's it like just to sit and allow yourself to feel sad? The mind then wants to create drama stories. In mindfulness practice, the mind has nothing to offer you. So this is one of the tricky parts that takes a long time to get confidence in. The mind is a beautiful expression of mindfulness. You cannot think yourself to freedom.
You cannot think yourself to freedom. That is a beautiful expression.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful expression. Mind you, a lot of the stuff that's on social media and everything is all about think to be free, think and grow rich, think and do this. But what you're saying is completely contra to that. It's like your mind is
you just can't think yourself. You're only free when you're no longer entranced by any of your thinking.
Interesting.
That's when you're free.
Interesting. Yeah. So So going back to where we are now and being a mindful leader and burnout and all of that, what are some things that you can share with us? Like how do we balance this whole dynamic that we've got going? Because of course there's a lot of stuff also out there. We need to be more resilient. And my friend Paul this morning I was telling him I'm having a podcast with you, and he said you need to ask him this question because there's all this stuff on being resilient and breaking through challenges and doing all this stuff. But at the same time, we've got this whole thing of take a break, be mindful of yourself and your body, have to rest and. How do we balance all this? And how do we create an environment, not only at work, but also at home? Like, what are some tips that you can share with us on this?
So the first thing I would say is stop bullshitting yourself. Because what we do is if
stop the BS, people.
If you think about the basics of it, right? Get enough sleep.
Yeah.
Do some exercise. Yeah. Right. So 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Look after that. It's precious. Get some movement, up to about half an hour of movement, even if it's a walk every day. Mm-hmm. Eat healthily. Mm-hmm. Right. So you just feed your body with nobody. There's not a person who's listening to this podcast who doesn't know what healthy food is, right? Vegetables, fruits.
You mean it's not chocolate, not Maltesers?
Yeah. So
ice
we
cream?
don't need to. We don't need to read any more articles. We don't need. And then the last part is, my 4 is meditate, right? It's practice, because your mind is really a source of a lot of misery and stress and burnout. And if you learn to tame the madness of the mind, I don't like the term control or tame, but if you learn to access a deeper awareness and a stillness, it's incredibly nourishing. Now, those are basic things, right? What we do as people is we waiting for some messiah or some tip or someone's got to give me some... and what we're still doing is we're looking outside of ourselves for someone to come and rescue us, right? And it's just the first step I would say to people is get real with yourself and admit to yourself you are the captain of your own life. You really are. Stop believing that it's your boss, it's your work. It's like it's a victim mindset that's just flat out wrong. It's not true. I always, for myself, it's like whenever I'm in some kind of mindset where it's like, oh, woe is me because the economy, as soon as I notice that victim story, I drop it now. It's like it's of no value at all. I get to feel, now it doesn't mean I can't feel my sadnesses and my hurts because that's part of life, but it's like the victim story, no. So that's the first thing. I don't think there's anyone there listening to this who doesn't know. Get good sleep, get some movement, eat healthily. We all know.
But we're like you said before, we're waiting for some magical thing, someone to tell us, okay, now I know why I'm not losing weight or why I'm not sleeping or why I'm so stressed at work.
Exactly. And the truth of it is this, is effectively those 4 basic things, what they represent for most of us is if we did them well, we have to get over addiction. That's what it's really about. A person who says to me, I don't have 10 minutes to meditate a day, is the same person who spends an hour on social media a day. It's delusional addiction, right? And you're like, what they're really saying, and this is what we have to get real with ourselves, is what they're really saying is, I just can't seem to get out of my addiction. Can you give me a tip that's pain-free to get out of addiction? No, there's no such thing. It's all lies. And you're going to end up consuming 1 million articles on resilience and well-being and blah, 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 blah. But basically, it's about knowing that when you move towards healthy choices, the part of the deal is cold turkey around your addictions. That's part of the deal. Really? And no one can rescue you from that. That's your work to do. So that's
these guys are doing this, going, yes, finally someone speaks the truth. Yes, they're smiling. You know what? You're right. You just got to lean into it, don't you?
You've got to accept that making part of the process of becoming healthy is dealing with the things that you've been running from yourself, right? Like, I mean, I know, for example, when I went through a really painful period in my life, like I would play solitaire on my phone until I fell asleep. It was horrendous for me, right? My sleep and health. But the alternative was sitting with the lights off, right, in the dark room, in immense emotional pain at the time, And that was like far too scary for me. So I just
Yeah.
did this other compensating behavior. But if I were to be healthy and go, I'm turning the light off, I'm going to sit in the dark. I'm going to breathe with my sadness and grief. I might shed some tears, and I'm going to allow myself to rest with it and get my sleep in balance. That's the hard choice, but that's the healthy choice. And one leads to long-term well-being. If you look at ACT, acceptance commitment therapy, it's pretty simple, which is the gold standard in Australia for anxiety and depression treatment. It's pretty simple. It's like when you're anxious and depressed, the primary cause is you've lost yourself in endless little addictions, and you've lost sight. You've lost sight of what's really important. There is one thing I could say that's super helpful are rituals.
Rituals.
Rituals are really helpful. Yeah.
What kind of rituals?
Any kind of ritual. It could be a walking, anything that has like a diary appointment that you do regularly that anchors you back to something healthy in your life. It could be a sleep ritual. So, you at certain time, you turn the lights off and you read a book for 5 pages and you create a ritual coming up to your sleep. It could be a meditation. Your morning ritual is 10 minutes of meditation or yoga. It could be a date night for your marriage. You have a date night ritual where you book it in the diary, and that's your ritual to reestablish heartfelt connection in your relationship. It could be a ritual with your children, right? Where like one of the rituals we've just started doing this year is at least once a week, my wife and my little ones, we walk to the school together. It's a beautiful ritual that establishes connection. There's a softness. So they can be extremely helpful rituals in re-anchoring you back into those basics.
Interesting.
Sleep,
yes.
movement.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. That's very interesting. I don't have actually I do have a couple little rituals that I do, possibly in the morning, and I must admit when I don't do them, my day doesn't go as well as I'd like it to do. But when I do them, things, I feel more in control of my day, and I don't get so antsy-pantsy when things don't go the way I want them to go.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
Even the ritual, there's research that shows that children who have dinner at the table with their parents without technology, they do better psychologically than kids who have dinner in front of the TV.
I 100% believe in that. 100% believe in that.
Yeah. So it's something you can do if you're listening to the problem when you're lost in a whole bunch of bad habits. Firstly, you believe you're a victim. You feel like it's not your fault. You've got a million people to blame. It's your boss. It's your work. It's COVID. It's whatever. We've all got these things to blame. A way to you feel really overwhelmed, right? And this is why we're looking for a messiah, a knight in shining armor to come and rescue us, which they can't and no one will. That's why I say rituals can be really powerful because they can be one simple thing. I want to go for a 20-minute walk every second day. That's going to be my ritual. And what they do is they remind us that we're valuable. They remind us that we matter. They remind us that certain things that we've lost sight of matter. And they something doable, simple.
And you can be present in as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, so many great nuggets. Now, you've got this new book that's come out, Vertical Growth.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Huh?
So
is it different to the Mindful Leader?
It's a beautiful companion to the Mindful Leader. The Mindful Leader covers 7 practices of mindful leadership, and it's basically that's built of the world's most researched leadership model. So really pure. This is evidence-based. We know this is what makes leaders great. We've subsequently researched those 7 practices from the Mindful Leader book, and we've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that it has a huge impact on performance, etc., psychological safety, and so forth. Vertical growth came about because adult development theory is really fascinating. It turns out you can measure an adult's level of development.
Really?
Yes, and
How?
adults have different levels of development. So you could have 2 40-year-olds, and you could say, well, that one's definitely more mature than that other one, right? And you go, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
More mature, right? And so there's this whole field in psychology, mainly out of sort of Harvard, came this idea of that children have developmental milestones. It turns out adults can too have developmental milestones.
Wow, that's mind blowing.
Yeah,
that is mind blowing.
It's confronting though as well and I'll give you an easy example. The principle of development is that you are not ruled by a pattern of behavior. So you can see a pattern of behavior. So if I mature, if I grow, if I've grown as an adult development growth, I've overcome a pattern of behavior. Whereas I before I would just do that pattern of behavior. Let's say I'm critical of people, right? So I'm critical, I'm just criticizing people. And one day someone asks me, Michael, what's the benefit of criticizing people? And I'll stop and I go, well, not really. What are you cultivating in yourself while you're criticizing people silently in your mind? Oh, I'm criticizing an angry mind and body full of hate. Yeah, how's that working out for you? I'm like, yeah, it's not great. Like, I'm not happy. Oh, what? And you suddenly see, oh my God, that whole pattern's of no value. It just toxifies my life. And then you have enough awareness to not engage in that pattern. You are now mature. You've grown because you've seen an unhealthy pattern and you're no longer doing it. So the principle of adult development is the more you develop, the more you can see inside yourself, which is why we call it vertical growth. You can see down inside to your patterns that are not serving you, patterns of behavior, patterns of thinking. And then you can look upwards, this is the other part of vertical growth, to an ideal, like how do I want to be? How do I want to show up in this life, right? I want to be compassionate. I want to be aware. Okay, great. So I can hold that in myself and I can look downwards and see where the patterns are out of whack with my deepest aspirations of who I want to be as a person. And then I can manage it and grow upwards, vertical growth, up towards the more compassionate human being that I long to be. So that's effectively, and it also came as a result of teaching leadership. One of the things that fascinated us was we always ask leaders, do leaders need to walk the talk? And everybody says, oh, yes, they do. And so we go, now we work with really senior leaders, right? In big corporations. That's our typical client. And so we would then expect when we say, do they need to walk the talk? Say, yes, we'd expect these senior leaders to really have a clear talk themselves that they're trying to walk, right? So we say to them in pairs, like turn to the person next to you and like describe the conscious talk you're trying to walk as a leader. And this is where things get really interesting. 1 in 10,000 have a clear talk, maybe.
Really?
Right.
1 in 10,000?
It's ridiculous how low it is. I haven't got a formal piece of research in that, but just from experience, it's extremely rare. Last year, 2022, I met one leader, one out of thousands we worked with, right?
Really?
When we met them, yeah, which is fascinating. It's like, huh? And then we test them. We say, what's the talk you're trying to walk? And if they can describe it, we'll say, okay, good. When's the last time you failed at walking your talk? Can you recall the last few weeks? And they'll usually like, no, blanket. Well, if it's a conscious practice, if you're consciously living it, you'll know. You'll be able to recall.
Yeah.
Or when did you last overcome fear or discomfort and still walked your talk? And it's like, when's the last time someone gave you feedback and when you were walking your talk? Now you're getting to even more rarefied territory. And so we're like, how come a human being can go, yes, leaders need to walk talk and have such conviction around it and be a leader themselves and have no talk that they're trying to walk? Like, what is that? And it turns out you can explain it through adult development is that most people are completely driven by external validation. Totally driven.
It doesn't surprise me either. Yeah.
They're driven by external validation and security needs. And
well, we're taught that from such an early age. Yeah, you
exactly.
go to school, the teacher gives you a star, good work, well done, Maria.
Yes.
And then you go and you kick a goal. Yeah, well, you come home, your friends go, well done, you got a medal, honey. So we're always searching for the external. So validation. It's no wonder we grow up into these adults that high performance adults is like leaders that we're actually not thinking about what we're doing per se as much as how do I look. What can I accomplish? Correct. How many team members do I have in my team? And all of that. Yeah.
And so the reason why what we've discovered is people don't define a set of principles or values they lead by is because invariably they'll bring you directly into conflict with your approval needs, the looking good parts. So in other words, if I'm honest, let's take honesty as a simple value. Like if I'm honest, I might say, oh, I don't know the answer to that. Or gee, I don't really know how to do that. That simple practice of honesty may come into conflict with, or people will think I'm stupid, so I better not tell him. So even at that simple level of honesty can be very confronting. Or, the thing that I would say in organizations that's mind-blowing is the extent that people will go to avoid an honest conversation, an accountable conversation.
Really?
That's unbelievable. It's truly mind-blowing.
Well, we're a
And
small
so-
team here, so it's for me it's almost hard to grasp because many of our conversations are open and honest, probably sometimes too open and honest if I'm going to be talking truthfully. But so for me, it'd be very difficult to be in a situation like that where I can't be my authentic self when I need to be, especially if I'm having a bad day.
Yeah. So, it comes down to, let's say someone's performance is average and they say, how's my performance? And you say, oh, it's good. Like, why do we say it's good? Because we just don't want the discomfort of the difficult conversation. We just want that person to like us, just want it to be easy. And so that's an example where we're being driven by approval needs instead of integrity. Or we have a conversation at home where we complain about someone at work. That person is such an idiot, like, but we don't have the direct conversation with that person. That's out of integrity. And so what we'll find is that when we begin to define an internal code for ourselves that's about being quite a refined human being, we very quickly start seeing a whole bunch of gaps in our behavior. That whole process is very uncomfortable. So we've come to the conclusion that people don't define the talk they're trying to walk because it's so confronting to even do it. And yet we all want a leader who walks the talk, right? We'd long for it. Or how many of us work in organizations where we go, can we just bloody well follow the values on the website and the wall? Wouldn't that be nice, And it's like we have these contradictory behaviors, and then the leaders themselves who are doing the contradictory behaviors have no idea they're doing it. They're like, oh yeah, no, I'm like, I believe in the values, I believe in integrity. And then they go home and complain about people and they don't have the direct conversation. And you go or they're people pleasing. And you go, do you realize that when you avoiding conflict, that's out of integrity? And we're like, what? No, that's not out of, yes. You're not telling the truth. You're telling pretty stories and you're not, that's integrity 101. Like, oh, I never saw it that way. Why didn't you ever see it that way? Because it's too confronting.
It's too
confronting to see it that way.
So when it makes us feel uncomfortable, and it goes back to what you were saying before, you have to sit with that uncomfort. You've got to process why you feel uncomfortable confronting that person. Yes. What is that going to bring up for you? Exactly.
So vertical growth, the book is about a system. We created a system, a structured process for growing as a human being. It's beautiful, based on a matrix. And it's really the systematic process of because it came from a beautiful quote from Edwin Friedman, my favorite leadership author, where he said, people who are committed to continual self-regulated growth, who do it, make any leadership theory look amazing. And it's like, I remember reading that and I go, that is so true in my experience, right? Some people have just got this ability to take any average leadership training and do cool stuff with it. And some people, you can give them the best training on earth and nothing happens, nothing changes. What is the X factor that creates genuine lifelong growth? How do you grow as a human being so that you can integrate and do useful stuff with, like, the Mindful Leader book, for example, or, and so that's what vertical growth is all about. And we have beautiful 26 leaders. You wouldn't believe it. They held up their hands to have some of their deepest fears and secrets revealed in this book with their names on it. All senior corporate leaders. Was really cool. The publisher was shocked. My publisher was like, I can't believe these people have signed off on these stories.
That is so good. But how helpful is that for anyone reading the book? Like, I'm actually going to go and get that now and read it because I loved your first book, and I'm super, super interested in that. I think there's so many good, useful practices and things that you can implement easily. And, some of it is like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that, and what have you. These guys have got a massive sign in front of me. I don't mean to look away from you. They're going, 1 hour. You've crossed the 1 hour. I could keep talking to you all day. You are so full of wisdom and insights, and just having this conversation is already tripping me out in my own thought process, going, wow, there's so much I need to learn. I really need to get into this mindfulness practice a little more than just sitting there for 2 minutes going, okay, I'm done now. Let's go. Let's go. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Thanks, I can't wait to read.
Lovely chatting to you.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing. And, just on an ending note, these questions can go out the door because I've asked you none of these questions because you've answered them in this entire conversation. But just lastly, from your perspective and all the people that you've worked with and interviewed and helped over the years and your experience, what would be the ideal workplace workplace culture? Like, what do you want to see in the future of corporations and leadership roles that you think is sustainable and would lead to obviously a better future, not just for small businesses and corporations, but also for governments as well. You know.
Well, we've actually defined our own workplace culture that way, which is our own dream. We're always trying to walk the talk, right?
Yeah.
And we've defined our workplace culture, which is in essence what we teach corporate organizations is, number one, honesty, really, really, really honest. I mean, full honesty, which is I've never seen in an organization, right? So what does honesty create? The deepest level of trust and connection. Mm-hmm. The second one is accountability. So when things don't go well, there's no blaming. There's only introspection. There's only, what's my part in this? How can I grow? What can I do to shift this? The leaders do the same. When things go wrong with customers, an organization asks themselves, what can we do better? So it's a constant growth mindset rooted in accountability, also holding other people to account. So when we are behaving in ways that erode trust or damage people's well-being, or that someone calls us out, and when they call us out on behaviors that are not healthy, we thank them. We appreciate it because we know we're an imperfect work in progress. There's a humility around that. And then the last one is kindness, that there's a deep sense of compassion and connection and kindness for each other, because workplaces can be profoundly unkind in multiple ways. So and the combination of accountability, honesty, and kindness is remarkably challenging because some people can do accountability, but they're unkind. Some people can be kind, but not honest or accountable. It's really challenging to get that mix right, and it requires adult development growth. But we would say that's what a great workplace looks like. And in our experience, I would say the greatest heartache in any organization is the dishonesty. It's the inconsistency in the behaviors. It's I think statistically only 30% of people in organizations trust their own CEO.
Wow. The other question to that is, how do you get, like, I'm always open with my team, and I'm always the one putting my hand up going, yeah, I stuffed that up, and I'm sorry, I mucked it up, or I didn't do that. Yeah, it's my fault. Like, I mean, numerous times. How do you cultivate that trust in your team so they don't feel afraid to come and say, look, I'm not feeling
you
it,
role model it. You do what you do. You role model it beautifully. You just role model it. That's what people. We say the three leverages of culture change. We call them the three R's. The role modeling of senior leadership, the rituals in the business, we talked about rituals, and the rewards and accountability, what you reward. There's this beautiful example. One of our clients recently, 150 of them, I was doing a live keynote, and one of them stands up halfway through I asked a question, says, one of the senior leadership team says, I suck at accountability and I'm not good at it and I'm working on it and it's a struggle for me. I really, really, and I'm not sure how to do it well, but I need to really improve it. And the CEO stood up and applauded him.
Bravo.
It's just a beautiful example of, like, the whole organization gets a message, their rewards and accountability. So if you share that you're not good at something and you're trying to learn and you grow, you get applause from the CEO. Wow, that's how you do it. And then, so role modeling, rituals, and rewards and accountability. I always say what you've got to shift that.
What about vulnerability? Allowing yourself to be vulnerable as well, and that hence then allowing your team or the people around you to be vulnerable as well.
That's the role modeling. It's all in role modeling is the biggest one.
Yeah,
it's the role modeling of vulnerability, and I always say appropriate vulnerability. Always, because I could say, let me tell you about my sex life. It's not going so good at home. Like, that's not. People don't. Your vulnerability needs to be contextually appropriate. Like, I stuffed up this thing. I'm confused as to get this right at a workplace. Because what we've seen is a lot of people do vulnerability, and they kind of it's just like free for all vulnerability, and that just leaves the person doing the vulnerability more exposed, and they end up re-traumatizing themselves. So it's worth saying, we always say contextual vulnerability is a useful term we use.
I like that. Michael, it's been such a pleasure. I'm so grateful that you took the time to be so open and honest with with me and the audience today. And it's been, such a great conversation. I've learnt so much through this conversation, and also, I'm really excited to read Vertical Growth. And really tap into a little more. And you've actually inspired me to kind of really take on a little bit more meditation than I am currently doing.
Just let me know how it goes.
I will. I'll let you know how it goes. Hey, 2016 was an interesting year, and I was committed to meditation a lot more. Not as much as you, but I was meditating every morning for about 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I will say it was probably one of the better years of my life.
It's like that.
And now my brother said something to me, he goes, oh my God, you're turning into mum. Now I've given up on everything. I'm eating chocolate.
Yeah.
I'm working too much, not sleeping enough, and I'm constantly whinging and playing victim. And that's got to shift. That's got to shift. And having this conversation is finally made me shift. Like, oh, okay, I can't do this anymore. No one's believing me. But Peter's sitting there going, is there any more tips and advice that you'd like to share with that anything small or a little nugget? Oh, now they're saying no.
No, we're saying you've gone for an hour and 20.
So what? It's good.
Yeah. So I need to run literally in about 3 minutes. I need to wrap up. I've got a child to take to tennis. My wife's texting me here. So
go.
I would just say that our favorite question in finishing up, my favorite question is, any challenge you have in life, any challenge, start with this question: what's my part in this? Is your marriage not going well? Are your children not thriving? Is your work? What's my part in this? And then, if you don't know what the answer is, like you don't know what's my part in the difficulties of my marriage, ask for feedback. And then when someone gives you feedback, if they're brave enough to give you feedback, or if someone gives you tough feedback, that's a sign that they actually trust you enough to give you the tough feedback. That's good. Then don't be defensive. And we have a little tip for that. Just lean in and say, when they say, oh yeah, you do these terrible behaviors, you lean in and you say, oh, tell me more. And that's like, is to try and stay. You've done it beautifully in this interview. I really love the way you can laugh at yourself. And I think that quality of laughing at yourself and knowing that you can be dysfunctional and knowing that your dysfunctional behavior can hurt other people. It's like those are the people that we all stay in love with.
Oh.
It's those people that have the honesty and humility to keep admitting that they can, make mistakes, but they don't diminish themselves by it, right? They can just go,
I'm human. And
exactly.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful thing to say. Thank you. But I think we're all human, and I think the more we stand up and say, you know what, I mucked up, and and that's okay, and I'm trying to do better next time.
Yeah.
And it's thank you. That's really lovely. I'm not going to hold you up anymore. These guys are going to kill me. They're giving me death stares. I kid you not. If I can turn this screen around,
I'm pretty sure my wife's probably giving it to me in the next room too.
Go and pick up your child. Lovely chatting to you. I'll send you a link. I'll send you all the stuff once it's done. I've got your email. But take care and good luck with the book.
Really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Love chatting to you as well.
Me too. Ciao. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode of Staying Alive and Reach podcast.